Hello, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan. It's an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Let's get right to it. I am so happy to be joined today by two friends, Jonathan Rauch and Liz Joyner. Jonathan Rauch is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution and a contributing writer at The Atlantic. He's the author of several books, including two of the most frequently referenced books of the last 35 years, Kindly Inquisitors and The Constitution of Knowledge, as well as his most recent book, which we talked about earlier this year, Cross Purposes, Christianity's Broken Bargain with Democracy, which we discussed, like I said, we discussed earlier this year. Liz Joyner is the founder and president of the Village Square, an organization she started almost 20 years ago, which has been building civic trust in American hometowns between people who don't look or think alike. Yeah, that'll happen when pigs fly, as they say, but she's doing it. Liz was named by USA Today as an extraordinary American who is making our nation a better place. And speaking of earlier this year, we also learned earlier this year that Liz is revered, respected, and sometimes even feared by Navy SEALs. True story. Did you know that, John?
Oh, gosh, I had no idea where you were going with that, Corey.
Well, John.
By one Navy SEAL, maybe.
Navy SEAL captain, no less. But the reason I brought Jon and Liz today on the show, they serve on the board of the Heterodox Academy, whose mission is to advance open inquiry, viewpoint diversity, and constructive disagreement across higher education. And I couldn't think of a more relevant topic for our time. So I think the last time we all hung out was at a diner in McLean, Virginia. Am I remembering that right?
It was. And in fact, I was lucky enough to hang out with Jon just yesterday at a Panera in Falls Church, Virginia, which is my hometown and also now Jon's.
Liz grew up about half a mile from where I live.
Oh, how about that?
From Panera, Bailey's Crossroads, which is my Northern Virginia branch office.
Oh, how that's awesome.
And where he's a member of some club where you get drinks for half price or something like that.
I want to be the part of that club. I would fill up that ticket pretty quickly, depending on the drinks we're talking about. But, you know, I figured we'd just jump right in. So the Heterodox Academy might not be on a bunch of folks' radar just yet, but I did want our listeners to learn a little bit more about it. So if you could, maybe Jon, if you would, the story as you understand it, going back to it was our other friend Jonathan Haidt who was part of the founding of it, wasn't it? Could you give us a little bit of the background of the organization, Jon?
Yeah, originally this was Jonathan Haidt's brainchild. Some bit over 10 years ago, I think the story is, he gave a speech at, I think it may have been the American Psychological Association. Don't hold me to the details. But he said, look, guys, we have a problem, which is that viewpoint diversity is really in short supply in our profession. And if that continues, it's going to distort the science that we do. And it's also going to damage our credibility. And he and some other folks said, well, you know, this is only a problem that can really be solved within the academy. We've got to help make sure the academy is welcoming to multiple different points of view and does not get captured by any one type of politics or ideology or, for that matter, viewpoint. So they founded Heterodox Academy. There's no "the" in it, as far as I know. Since Liz and I are on the board, we could, of course, add "the."
I think we'd be outvoted, Jon.
I have that problem with Village Square as well. Is it the Village Square?
It is. We do have a "the," so okay. I'm highly inclined to put "thes" in.
What if I gave myself a the Corey Nathan?
Talking politics and religion without killing each other show. Yeah. You could pile up the "thes." So they gave it a really unwieldy name on purpose. They wanted this to be a group of faculty and academics. For a while, it wasn't open to anyone but credentialed faculty of universities. And they wanted it to be more of an insiders group and not to be, a grassroots group and not to be pressuring universities. So Heterodox Academy has been in business now 10 years. It has grown very substantially. And I was brought on the board about a year ago on the strength of my own modest contributions to trying to bring the American Academy back to its core mission of seeking truth, regardless of ideology and politics.
It's interesting that you mentioned John Haidt's speech from about 10 years ago. The organization, Heterodox Academy, has been around for a while now.
10 years.
And a lot of us might think that, wokeism and cancel culture and all of the accoutrements that go along with it is relatively new. But not only did he and quite a few others identify this. John, if I remember correctly, you were looking at things along these, we called it something different, maybe political correctness, going back to at least the early 90s. Do I have that right?
Yeah, my book on this now, I think I can say it's a classic because a book that sells better 32 years after publication than it did when it came out probably warrants that term. I wrote a book called Kindly Inquisitors, the new attacks on free thought, and identified the core elements of what later would become wokeness. A lot of stuff happened, but the basic outline of the idea that using words that hurt people's feelings or that are ideologically offensive to them or that are just plain wrong is a form of violence. I said this cuts to the very heart of the scientific enterprise, which is based on criticism. And let's face it, criticism hurts. You need to be able to have those heterodox ideas. Often they're right. Even when they're wrong, they stimulate important research and debate. So, yeah, the problem is not new. It has, excuse me, it has morphed and developed in different ways, which we can talk about, but it's been around for a while.
And Liz, this isn't just something in the academy. I'm sorry to cut you off, but this isn't something in the you identified this at least as far back as 20 years ago because Village Square is coming up on 20 years, right? 2006. So you were clearly identifying this even further back than that.
Yeah, although I think that probably gives me too much credit. I think what I did is I started seeing it along the way. So what we did at the Village Square to bring people together across ideological differences was that we would look for sort of the best arguments that you could find on each side of a discussion, which is kind of countercultural because a lot of the media organizations will look for the worst side of an argument. So we're looking for the best sides of arguments, and we were getting people together who didn't see things the same way. And what I started seeing then is the beautiful value of having different brains addressing it together in the same room, inside of respectful conversation, tussling it out, and that is in fact the way that you learn things. And so when Heterodox Academy came along, and before that, when I became aware of John Rauch's work with Kindly Inquisitors in particular, it completely fit with our experience, which is that you need people who don't see things your way to be able to find truth, to be able to seek the way that John puts it in his book, The Constitution of Knowledge, is that you need to have this funnel. And the funnel needs to be as big as it possibly can be at the top side so that you're pulling all the ideas in to, and then the Constitution of Knowledge, the institutions that we have between us, the academy, the scientific method, the jury system, theoretically American governance, that funnel, John should explain it because he's better at it than I am, but that's like the process that out of the other side of the funnel then comes truth. And to do that, we have to pull as many ideas in as possible. So I think that just operationally, I was seeing it and then recognize the genius John's thinking, John Rauch's thinking, and then also the importance of Heterodox Academy. And I also wanted to go back and just say about John's work. I really I think John saw what I wish we had all seen when he wrote Kindly Inquisitors, we would be in much better shape if if it was mandatory reading. Um, and because now we're sort of starting to understand the repercussions of, the kind of ecosystem of illiberalism that we're now in. And I think there probably is something about being right a little too early. But if you haven't read Kindly Inquisitors, I would strongly recommend it, and your mind will be blown that it was written when it was. And then also John's contribution to this is not at all modest. It is extraordinary. And I can't exactly say this for all your listeners because you have too many of them, but I truly do. After Constitution of Knowledge, which I just happened to have a copy of because I got to see John yesterday.
There you go. I love
Um,
it.
and he gave a lovely inscription for me, but he gave me grief about it the whole time. Um, but ever since it was published, I literally, in the groups that I'm a part of, I offer to buy it for people, if they will please promise to read it. I think it's that important. So he's kind of the guy. You're talking to the guy of the moment, in my opinion.
I don't think a week goes by when I don't. And now John's going to give me crap for not letting a day go by without recommend. But in all seriousness, not a week goes by when I don't recommend it. But I could get into that habit because there are people who are seeing some of the symptoms in our culture more now than ever. It would be a really relevant gift, and it is becoming a part of the lexicon. Also, hearing other scholars, other public thinkers and writers referencing it constantly, it really is a great contribution to the way we think. Although John is what do we call it? What's the podcast I'm trying to get you to? The epistemological humanitarian.
He is.
But okay,
all I need to do for the rest of this podcast is sit here while you two swell my head. This is great. This is the best show I've ever done. I love this program.
He really is an epistemological humanitarian. See, I can't say it. The first time I was with John in person was when we had invited him to come to the Village Square and in person in Tallahassee, to speak on his book, and the Kindly Inquisitor, and or Kindly Inquisitors, sorry, no there. And I picked him up in Gainesville to drive him back. And I am fond of saying that John has one of the best brains, the most inspiring brains that I know, and he teases me, one of the most. But John basically sat there and asked me questions 2.5 hours up to Tallahassee. And I think that is that how you get so smart, is you just let other people speak and then you absorb things? Because
I just realized from a very early age that if I'm talking, I'm not learning.
Mm.
And if I'm listening, I probably am learning. As a journalist, my very first boss, 40 plus years ago in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Joe Goodman, bless his late soul, used to say, every person has a story and your job is to find it. So I was looking for your story.
That reminds me of a quote that I just recently learned that Frederick Douglass, and I don't know the quote off the top of my head, but he tied directly the freedom of speech to the freedom to hear, right? And that's part of what Heterodox Academy is addressing, is that safe spaces don't necessarily make us safe, because if we don't have the opportunity to hear contrasting points of view, then we're not really able to test our own theories. Much of what you cover in Constitution of Knowledge, how this all comes about. I did want to broaden our view for a second. The Heterodox Academy, the problems that, and I like the short form HXA, that Heterodox Academy is addressing. It seems there's obviously still an ongoing battle inside of academia and how we're doing this. And the events of the last, couple of weeks really bring that to the fore. But do you think do you think Heterodox Academy can be situated to fight the threats from without? So specifically, Jon, you wrote a piece for Persuasion about a month ago where you were talking about the alt-right and how the alt-right is in parallel with the excesses of the far left, the illiberalism of the far left, and you were breaking that down into pre-modern, modern, and postmodern, if I remember correctly. But it seems like the alt-right is basically driving the bus of the federal government, specifically in their illiberalism. So threats to free speech, free inquiry, viewpoint diversity, constructive disagreement, that's being threatened by our federal government, not just the institutions of higher learning, but you could describe it as the seven mountain mandate, the seven pillars of our society. So do you think, what do you think about that? Is Heterodox Academy positioned to be able to process the reality of that? And if so, what can it, or is it going to stay in its lane within academia?
Well, I'll be very interested to get Liz's view on this. In fact, maybe I should chicken out and make Liz go first. It's been a challenge. So there are two constitutions that Heterodox Academy is committed to. One is the Constitution of Knowledge, and that governs how the pursuit of knowledge is supposed to be performed. And a lot of universities have strayed from that. And that's what Heterodox Academy was originally devoted to. Then you have the US Constitution. And we are also devoted to that Constitution. And that has this thing called the rule of law. Things like, for example, you can't have all your federal grants suspended until there's been a proper procedure to find out if you violated any federal law or requirement. You can't just have a president say, well, execution first, trial later, which is what happened to Harvard and a number of other places. So we find ourselves in a position where we're fighting for constitutional norms on both sides. Now our reason for being is not to take on the challenges of the Trump administration. There are other groups that are doing that and doing that well. And they include, for example, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, the American Civil Liberties Union, some academic groups. And it's not that we're ducking that fight, and it's not that our values are not clear on it, but we've always seen our mission as saying, look, whatever the government is or is not doing, the only real guarantee of the integrity of science and liberal education is the integrity of the people who are doing it. Specifically, the faculty, the professors, the administrations of our great universities. And if those become corrupt, or if they start to equivocate, or they're politicized, that's a problem that I don't actually think any government could fix. I think government would only make it worse by just compiling, adding on additional political constraints on inquiry. So our mandate remains what it was, which is reform from within. I'd be lying if I didn't say that the Trump administration has helped bring attention to our mission. And there's Liz will, again, I'll be interested in her take, but there is definitely heightened interest from university leaders saying, okay, now we get it. We can't keep on doing what we were doing because it was demolishing our public support. And also, we were going off track. So we're moving in the direction strategically now of being hands-on, we call it principled allies of universities that are serious about making some changes. And we're going to be hands-on. We're going to help with that. We're going to have a bunch of programs to do it. And then that's already underway. So that's our general approach. But Liz, over to you.
So I'm very glad that you didn't chicken out, Jon. That's a good answer. I've now been doing this long enough that I've seen the ecosystem of illiberalism accelerate. And so I do think it's really important to think of it that way, that that is, to me, Heterodox Academy is founded around some absolutely essential values of our civilization. And and it's important that at a time like this, with accelerating illiberalism that goes back and forth, sort of one fuels the other, um, that organizations that are, here to stay and advocate for those essential values of how we find truth and knowledge, to stay tied with the central principles, not to get swept up in the equal and opposite reactions. And so, as I started becoming familiar with the rise of illiberalism on college campuses, which frankly, I do think that one of the challenges that we have is that, many people were just in college before this happened, right? And so I would sort of hear little, I mean, for many years, I've heard, little stories about it, et cetera. And I kind of went, well, that's not college. That wasn't the college that I went to. And but as I became more familiar, have done work on college have campuses, have worked with people who, frankly, have been, I think, victims of ideological conformity and sort of groupthink, on campus. I've just become aware of the fact that, this is it. It felt to me like, oh no, what's the other shoe that's going to drop? And I'm afraid the other shoe has dropped kind of harder and faster than we thought it would. And that's what happens inside of an ecosystem that isn't, um, drawing from the values that John writes about so eloquently in the Constitution of Knowledge. That's why we've got to get back to those.
You know, I seem to get consensus when I talk in theory about hearing other points of view, making space for those who express different points of view, and being in the same room and in conversation with those across our differences. But then when I express something that is a little bit different, for example, there's some pressing ones that just happened since the killing of Charlie Kirk. But even before that, about 2 months ago or so, when Trump first applied pressure to Texas to do mid-decade redistricting, and then here in California, they were talking about doing the same in response to that. I expressed an opinion that a lot of my friends in the entertainment industry really didn't like, and that is the way to respond to illiberal backtracking, to going back on positive democratic renovations, which I think our independent commissions here in California were steps in the right direction in terms of democratic renovations, as Danielle Allen would refer to it. But I faced a lot of pushback on that because the times call for something different. The most frequent argument was, this time now we can't afford that. We can't fight, on principle. We have to fight fire with fire, basically. So all that to say, when I talk about it in theory, having conversations across our differences, there's a lot of nodding of the head and yes, we all should. And, but when it actually comes time to express a differing point of view, something relatively benign, like saying, I'm not going to vote for Prop 50 here in California, compared to the conversations we've been having over the last couple of weeks, it seems like we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to hold space for each other. We don't know how to say, that's an interesting idea, but here's what I thought, as opposed to, you are the problem. You are essentially liable for, I don't know, the worst crime, sexual assault I was accused of. You're essentially liable for sexual assault, because you're allowing those, you are part of what created the permission structure for Donald Trump to get elected again. So I don't know. I maybe you can help me. Have you seen more encouraging signs than what I've seen just over the last couple months, in conversations like I just illustrated?
So I'm not sure I have, which is maybe the depressing part of my answer, just because I think we're in very difficult times. But I think that what you're pointing out is really important, in that I think we're bad at understanding what you do at moments like this. And what our kind of default kind of lizard brain says is we don't want to talk to anybody who doesn't agree with us. We're just done with you. But if you want to win any argument, you have to start speaking to people who don't see it your way, right? And I also think that we have to, if you're someone who's concerned about the rise of the liberalism right now, I think that you have to think about its roots and where it came from. Like I said before, it's a cycle. And I mean, my politics are center left, but I'm doing this work long enough that I have had deep empathy for young conservatives on college campuses for a lot of years now. Because I see, we've had some work with us. We have people of all political varieties who work with the Village Square, and I see them self-censoring
Mm,
because because the environment is such that they can't say what they think has been on some campuses. And so if you fast forward that, a decade, it's a decade as long as Heterodox Academy has existed. You've got 10 years of young conservatives coming off of college campuses feeling like they couldn't say what they wanted to say. And if we're not creating spaces where people can come as they are and say what they think, which is the very underpinnings of our society, our civilization, our education system, then what happens is that you kind of tribe up, right? You circle the wagons. You're with people who look and think like you. Your thinking gets less sharp because you're not exposed to thinking, from across the spectrum. You grow, your group grows more extreme in the direction of the majority view. And then when you're in power, you know, there's more illiberalism. And so if we define this as being a problem that exists on one side, I think we're just missing the whole point.
mm.
And I think that I read something today, interestingly, that looking for it, at the Bulwark, JVL wrote this, and I copied it down because I just thought it was so beautiful. What I'd like you to talk about today is how we can love people back into communion with liberalism. I think that that's what we have to be doing now.
Say that one more time, Liz.
I have to read it. What I'd like you to talk about today is how we can love people back into communion with liberalism.
Mm.
That is JVL at the Bulwark.
Oh, that's great. I wouldn't have predicted that coming out of JVL. He's
I,
usually got a lot more acid.
yeah, I mean, I think that he's saying something that is real and true, and it's what we have to do right now. And we have to, fall back in love with liberalism and with the idea that, I mean, when I am queen, which I'm still working on, when I am queen, there's going to be the queen's loyal opposition. And the queen's loyal opposition is to be around me. They're gonna think completely differently than me, and they're gonna be around me and say, "Oh man, you are really about to step in it." That's the
Mm.
way. That's our intellectual roots that we have to get back to.
Do you think anyone's done that at the, presidential level since Abraham Lincoln? Or are we just idealizing even what that was, team of rivals and all that?
I don't know enough about Lincoln to say. Maybe John does. But I've heard. I remember President Obama talking about how he would regularly have a check with people, and they probably were people who thought like he did, but just sort of say, "What am I missing?
Mm.
Because we humans, we miss things."
Yeah.
Most presidents, in fact, I think really all presidents until Trump have made a real effort to try to sound like presidents of all the people. and not just the faction that elected them, and to use that kind of inclusive rhetoric. Now, George W. Bush pushed the envelope pretty far um, in the war against terror, as did his vice president. You're with us or you're with the terrorists kind of thing. But nonetheless, presidential rhetoric was about uniting until pretty recently. It's a new thing when a sitting U.S. president at a memorial service responds to the widow's statement that we must, it's exactly what actually Liz and JVL and you just said, which is that we've got to conquer the dark forces that led to Charlie Kirk's assassination with love. I'm not quoting directly, but I think that's the gist of it. When she's followed to the stage by a president of the United States who says, no, I don't love my enemies, I hate my enemies. That's a very different thing. Corey, so I'm not quite pushing back, but
Okay.
maybe a clarification. In California, your viewpoint is outnumbered. And in fact, I would probably vote with the governor of California on the redistricting plan. And we could talk about why. And I agree with you that it would probably be better if when this came up in conversation, the people you're talking to said something less like, Corey, you ignorant slut, and more like, that's a baby boomer joke from Saturday Night Live. For youngins. And something more like, oh, that's different. How did you arrive at that conclusion? But the Constitution of Knowledge does not say that you should always be low-key and pleasant in the way you present your criticism. In fact, one of the main motivations of science, according to sociologists, one of the things that really drives people to do that extra bit of hard research is, and I quote the great science sociologist David Hull, the desire to get that son of a bitch. And so you are in robust dialogue with people who disagree with you. And I'm not saying you're whining about that, because you're not wrong that there are better and worse ways to do it on balance. But that isn't the problem. The problem we're going after is when coercion is used to silence your view, including social coercion. But if you're worried about losing your podcast or your job, or worse yet, if the FCC is saying, we may have to suspend Corey's license if he doesn't change his tune, that's the world we're in now. Or when you're in an intellectual environment which is supposed to be open and only one side can effectively be heard, that's a problem.
So that's a good point. And I will say that I'm cherry picking some of the worst examples of some of the responses I got. And it's not to say that I can't be persuaded. There's still time before we vote on that proposition.
Good. Let's do a call.
Well,
I'll work on you.
I'm happy to talk about it. I can be persuaded about that. But I'll give you a different example, and this better illustrates exactly what you were just saying. Almost exactly 4 years ago, Dave Chappelle had a special that came out on Netflix called The Closer. And it was a long story about a friendship that he made with a trans person. And he got to a really poignant point about his friend that they were, I don't know if they went by they or them or him or her, but this person was a comedian and studying comedy. But before he got to the end of the hour and made that poignant point, he was making some really sharp-edged jokes, if you want to call them that, about trans people. And a lot of my friends in the industry, I still have business in the entertainment industry, many of whom actually worked at Netflix, staged walkouts. They were, and a lot of them didn't even watch the special, but they just heard that he was making jokes about trans folks. And they wanted Chappelle's special off the air. They walked out of Netflix. They were protesting their own company. They wanted Netflix to deplatform him. And at the time, I said, well, I found a lot of his jokes cringeworthy. I largely support his freedom of expression. And additionally, I support Netflix's, as a private company, decision to platform his expression. And that came about as close to being excommunicated from the industry that I've been in since 99, 2000. Now, I look back at some of that dialogue, and at the end of the day, it was just people feeling very passionately that they got into the speech as violence, and he was, punching down and picking on already marginalized people who are targets of violence. So there were robust arguments, but some of the, especially offline comments that I got, it was clear that that not only were they not going to be doing business with me, but they were going to take steps to make sure that I wasn't going to be able to. They were going to do what they can to make sure that I wasn't going to be able to continue in that industry. So that was a different example. Now, ironically, last week when Jimmy Kimmel got suspended, a lot of not just these are the same people who generally, but these are the same people, the actual people who were on the exact opposite side of that argument.
Yeah. So
So
back to the ecosystem point, right? And that's what's happening. It's an ecosystem that it sort of brings out the worst in us. We're completely hypocritical because, when you do it, it's one thing. When we do it, it's another thing.
right,
And and also I mean, if you're silencing people in a democracy that is supposed to, govern by bringing everyone to the table, kind of what comes around goes around. It's not going to work out that well for you.
yeah. Is it? Do you think that's a better example, John, or am I still just being a thin-skinned crybaby?
If it were just by itself, you're probably a thin-skinned crybaby, especially since, if I recall correctly, I can't believe that was 4 years ago already. Since I believe Netflix responses to that was to completely shrug it off. Some employees had a protest and said we can't work at a place that would treat marginalized communities this way, and those employees were basically told to pound sand. And so, if the institutions hold firm, and the institutions say, well, you're entitled to protest. If you don't like it, you're even entitled to say someone shouldn't be working here, shouldn't be broadcast. But we're not knuckling under to that kind of pressure. Then we're in a system where, yeah, okay, that's fine. It's robust dialogue, it's debate. To go back to what I said earlier, it becomes a different kind of problem if power centers, which could be a university administration, for example, or it could be the federal government weaponizing the federal budget and grants. If power centers like that become coercively involved in putting its thumb on the scales of the conversation or silencing part of the conversation, that's where I draw the line.
Right. So I see what you're saying. So you're more concerned about institutionally what's happening. The illustrations I'm providing are just, basically in my conversation, my day-to-day conversations, whether it's at the coffee
Well,
shop,
yeah,
online, or at the local bar.
I don't mean to reject them because it's a spectrum, as Nadine Strawson, the great free speech scholar and former ACLU president, points out. Free speech is not just about law, it's about culture. And you want a culture where people are willing to allow people to express colorful, sometimes obnoxious, wrong-headed, blasphemous, and bigoted ideas without rushing to the barricades and demanding they be punished. People should look to other ways to marginalize that kind of speech. Try ignoring it, or
Yeah.
try laughing it off,
Yeah.
or
Well,
just try what I said earlier, which is if you're dealing with a rational actor, which Corey Nathan presumably is when he's not in his cups. Say, okay, Corey, I think that's wrong, but why don't you tell me more? So those are all other ways to handle it. Civil society has lots of ways to handle these things
right.
and should be left alone by power centers and the use of coercion and illiberal and authoritarian means for the
Okay.
most part.
So authoritarian means power centers. We don't live in that time right now, being left alone by power centers. So I do want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about Heterodox Academy and specifically progress that's being made, and we'll get to that. But I really feel like I think that we need to talk about what your greatest concerns are, and there's a long list of them. since the beginning of this administration. But what? Let me just I'll just ask you baldly, what are you most concerned about in terms of what you've seen so far from this administration and where you think this is all going? Specific as it relates to free speech, free inquiry, viewpoint diversity, constructive disagreement.
I think I would say, I would say again that my concern right now is that we are accelerating the cycle of illiberalism and intolerance and the binary, right? That when you think about how we're thinking about this massive, group of 340 million people, there's a lot of what they think and what they did going on. And that
Mm.
is a very human, um, you know, uh, uh, we humans are, have you guys heard of Dunbar's number? I love
Oh,
that whole set of thinking.
yeah.
Um, so, if we really are, if you believe that, we're really sort of designed to be in groups of 150-ish, roaming the plains, hanging with our people, we're sort of out over our design um, uh, potential already in the fact that we're having to deal with such a complex world. And it's very natural for us to sort of default to what they are doing. It's extraordinarily dangerous. We are to me, at an incredibly dangerous moment. That I mean, we're seeing how the assassination of Charlie Kirk has fueled the moment we're in, right? And so my worry is that the cycle is just going to keep accelerating if we can't use it as a way to, expand what all of us are doing in the world in terms of spending more time being willing to be with people who aren't like us in our networks of people. That's what we need to be doing right now at an individual level. I'll let Jon comment on the other parts of it.
I think I'm just going to agree with what you said. I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, just
I,
to go ahead, John.
well, I'd add the very particular concern that the Trump administration is using tactics to attempt to intimidate and control political speech that we have never seen before, at least not in full public view. Nixon did stuff behind the scenes. But for example, the use of lawsuits and litigation to intimidate ABC News, CBS News, get settlements from them, which are implicit warnings. I'm going to sue you again and again, and I'm president and I can do it. That's right out of the Hungarian Orban authoritarian playbook.
Mm.
The weaponization of federal regulatory authority. Nice little broadcast network you have there. Be a pity if something could happen to it. We can do this the easy way or we can do it the hard way. That's mob talk right out of the mouth of the FCC chair to punish people who expressed views or networks that allowed views to be expressed that the administration didn't like. That's right out of the Hungarian authoritarian playbook. The use of financial penalties to control and intimidate media. Same thing. The use of federal dollars and grants to try, so far, not with all that much success, but to try to effectively end academic freedom at private universities like Columbia, where the administration initially demanded effective control over who the university would hire in some very significant ways. This was unheard of. No one dreamt of deploying federal government authority over its grants and budgets to try to control a private university. So in a day-to-day sense, that stuff bothers me most because the state has such immense power. That's why the founders went to such great lengths to try to cabin and restrain it. But in the big picture, it's exactly what Liz said. It's this
Yeah.
escalating spiral of intolerance.
Well, just to underscore what you said, I did hear what Trump said at that memorial service. But the one that shook me even more so, if that's possible, was what Stephen Miller said. And you could take his entire speech, but just one piece of it, he referred to the enemies of MAGA. He said, "You are nothing. You are wickedness. You are jealousy. You are envy. You are hatred. You are nothing. You have no idea the dragon you have awakened." So this, I guess, this is his version of bringing us all together
Do
in
you
a
have
time of
the do you
national
have
war.
this "So help me God" part of the speech in front of you?
I
That's
don't.
the part that chilled me.
Oh my God.
I can't quote it, but he said, "We are coming after you. We are using the full force of the government to come after you. So help me God."
As if
And
we haven't seen it. To your point, I mean, legal profession attacked. You talked about journalistic and media outlets bullied and threatened. Emoluments clauses basically mocked. Um, Judiciary opinions and rulings circumvented or ignored altogether. Um, we're seeing it across every pillar of our society. Are either of you concerned about the integrity of the 2026 elections?
Is that a trick question?
No, no, or I guess
Because the
maybe the
answer
better
is
way to
yes. Of course, the answer is yes.
yeah. So to
Trump and
I
the
should have
MAGA
said
people are already saying they want to get rid of mail-in voting.
yeah,
Fortunately, our elections in the U.S. are run by the states, and that will be a big obstacle. But I think if I understand this correctly, they've already announced at the Justice Department that they're going to start investigating state election practices. They have talked in and outside the administration about criminalizing state election officials who do things that I don't know how exactly this would work, but criminal penalties, throwing people in jail if there are findings against them. I'm significantly more worried about 2028 than I am about 2026 for a bunch of reasons. But you'd be crazy not to worry about that. I should add, just institutionally, none of this is in Heterodox Academy's ballpark. I'm speaking just simply for myself.
yeah,
yeah, in fact, the whole point of Heterodox Academy is that it includes a ton of people who think differently, even about this, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, so let me pivot to that because we've been talking about a lot of things that are scary, a lot of the symptoms of this national ailment. But what kind of progress have you seen? You've been on the board, both of you have been on the board this year, but you've been involved in Heterodox Academy for a bit longer. What have you seen progress? Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
what does that look like?
Um, so, in the first stage of what you could call radical postmodern wokeness, whatever you called it, it moved very quickly, especially in the years leading up to 2020. But most people say, starting around 2013 and 2014 on through about 2020, you had a very rapid movement through elite universities of a desire to suppress dissident speech in the name of ideology or in the name of students are fragile and it's traumatizing, trigger warnings, all of that sort of thing. And that happened fast. I'm not sure why it happened fast, but it did. Faster than those of us on the pro-tolerance, free speech, liberal side could counter-organize. I mean, Heterodox Academy came into existence only in 2015, and it was one of the first to do so. In
We
the
would have
last
all been
five,
ready, though, if we had just read Kindly Inquisitors early.
yes, another free advertisement. Yes, available at fine bookstores everywhere.
No, I'm really saying it because it's just true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah,
We
we
knew.
could have seen this coming.
Mhm.
But even when I wrote that book, it looked like it was, moving slowly, cancer, not heart attack. Then it got more like heart attack. So it took a while, but starting 5, 6 years ago, and then accelerating, and before the Trump administration, let me emphasize, before the Trump administration, you began to see not only the formation of Heterodox Academy, but the Academic Freedom Alliance, which started out of Princeton and is now based at Yale. That's a NATO for professors, so that an invasion of academic freedom anywhere is an invasion everywhere, and they're active on those things. You saw the launching of alumni free speech networks, which are now in dozens of universities, and the idea there is to create a constituency for free speech, because that was one of the problems on campus. The administration only heard from the people who wanted to suppress it. You saw faculty groups begin to pop up. Stanford has one, MIT, Harvard has the Council on Academic Freedom. It's got several hundred faculty members. Steven Pinker, a distinguished psychologist, is one of the founders and leaders of it, creating a constituency. You had the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression get even more involved than it had in the past. I could go on. There's more of this. So what you had already begun to see was civil society within academia begin to say enough is enough.
Yeah, and this is a really important point too, because of the fact that I think in the accelerating equal and opposite reactions, I think if we are to have empathy for this moment, we need to remember that in some ways, the Trump administration was responding to some of these conditions, right? In a liberal way, perhaps, but it's really easy to sort of assume that things started from nowhere and the people that you don't agree with are the ones who did it, right? It's an ecosystem. This is all before Trump was president.
I'll add some what I think of as social or cultural antibodies, whether they be books like Jon, you introduced me to Yasha Monk when his book came out in 2023, The Identity Trap. Another one that just came out about a month and a half ago, Thomas Chatterton Williams, Some of Our Discontent, was very much an assessment recounting, in particular, of that summer of 2020. But I also see, well, what do we do about it? Organizations that have been around now for 20 years, like Village Square, Braver Angels has been around. Jon, you also introduced me to Rabbi Michael Holzman, the American Scripture Project. So you don't have to look too far and too hard to find, again, what I think of as antibodies. But
yeah, that's exactly right. It takes a bit of patience. It takes time to counter-organize. But I'll throw one more into the pile because I think it's so interesting and positive. And it's an example of how red state conservatives can respond constructively and helpfully to help create a more pluralistic environment on campus. And that's now over, I'm not sure the exact number, but I know it's over a dozen public universities and university systems have publicly funded schools of civic thought. And these are creating institutions within universities, excuse me, creating institutions within universities that can be homes for students and faculty to develop and flourish as classical liberals in that tradition. I've worked with the one at ASU, which is the first and maybe the best, and it's very impressive what's happening on these campuses. So we at Heterodox, we get mocked by activists on the right who say, well, you had your shot and you failed. There's no way academia is ever going to reform on its own. We're just going to have to use the brute force of government action to haul them back into line. And my answer to that is, well, that's just not true. You have to be a little bit more patient, but we're making headway. And I'm a bit worried. I don't know what Liz would say. I'm a bit worried that the administration's tactics may actually set back the forces of internal reform.
Yeah, and I mean that's what equal and opposite reactions do. And Heterodox Academy is aiming for true institutional change that stays no matter who's in control. And so it tends to not having a heavy hand witness the rise of woke and what's happened now to woke. It tends to have the opposite reaction that you hope.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about, some of which will just further depress me, but some of which I think we can begin to look forward. I do want to ask, it's always worth asking what I call the TP&R question. We've sort of been talking about it. But what this does is it brings it to, like I said before, the local bar, the local coffee shop, around the soccer field with, other parents in the community, at our churches, mosques, synagogues, in our classrooms at the local community college. The TP&R question: what do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with, perhaps even nurture relationships with people across our differences, such people who have different backgrounds and beliefs than we do, who get their news? This is a big one. I'm realizing that the people who get their news from different sources, it used to be Fox News versus MSNBC, but now it's Reddit or Trump Social, or, the democratization isn't even the word. It's like the fragmentation, the shards of the, just people get their info oriented, not even news, but just information from so many different fractured, fragmented sources. How can we do better at talking politics and religion without killing each other with all those different types of folks? Or is it even possible?
So I think that we need to refuse to buy into the they thing, them and us.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about it at an individual level, in the 2 decades I've been doing this work, I have never met a single person who, if you understand, to your point, Corey, what they know and what they don't know, what their background is, where they came from, what their experiences are, that don't make sense. Like if you talk to them and say, tell me why you think these things that you believe. We tend to mostly make sense as human beings, which means we have stories to tell. And I think that it really is a matter of I think at a moment like this, the best thing that we can do as individual humans is have empathy for other individual humans. And if you I do think that I don't know Charlie Kirk's work that well, but I do see the deep, deep sadness and loss that people feel. And I think that he was clearly somebody who had a lot of people's hearts. And we ought to at least be able to sort of say, yeah, I get that. And for the people in our lives, and just say, tell me how you are and how you feel. Um, I One of the people who actually has taught me a lot in both about universities and just in this space is one of my dearest colleagues, Dr. Jacob Hess. And Jacob actually he's conservative LDS church from Utah, and he wanted to spend his life, he has a PhD, he wanted to spend his life in the academy. And his distinct feeling is that he couldn't get a job because of some of his beliefs at the time that he sought a job. He's just a very wonderful, nice and person, so he's not angry or vengeful about it. But I think it's taught him to be as empathetic as he is and kind and to make friends. He talks about how he he uh, he had some hard feelings, and then his brother died when he was in graduate school. And the liberal students around him, fellow students around him, were just kind and wonderful and decent and reached out to him and loved him through that crisis. I think that is never a bad thing. And to wit, when I'm a DC native, and I know I can't talk about this without being emotional, but when I sat there on January 6th, watching what was happening and just weeping, just tears pouring out for hours, because I'm a real dweeby fan of this experiment of ours. I think it's the best idea that has existed in history. And I believe in it. I believe very flawed humans aren't perfect at it, but I believe in it, and it felt very personal. And I got one call that day, and it was from Jacob.
Mm.
And Jacob said that he wanted to know how I was, that he knew that this day would be hard for me. And he wanted to check to see how I was and wanted to just be with me, however it would be helpful. And I think the moment is a moment like that for all of us individuals. The I like fighting fire with water instead of fire.
Mm,
And if we can come, deep in our souls and realize not only that that's what we can do for this moment that we're in, is to see people as people who make sense and who have stories, and to ask them how they are. But then also to kind of re-believe what I think that most of us do believe is the idea that we are better together, that a diverse people can self-govern if they understand, if they take care of the institutions that we have established, to do so, improve them, but
yeah.
not tear them down. Read the Constitution of Knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
Getting all kinds
and
of plugs, John.
and to re-believe that. And you talked about the scary things. And again, I only watched some, only heard some, but I think that Erica Kirk provided something
Yeah.
there that maybe we can grab onto too. I think there was something there.
So John, before before you answer the TP&R question, a couple of times you've been on the program, you referred to what Braver Angels espouses and the way to ask somebody about their story. I was channeling my inner Jonathan Rauch. A fellow texted me over the weekend. He was initially responding on a conversation we were having on one of the TP&R threads about Jimmy Kimmel's what was happening with Jimmy Kimmel, and he brought up what I thought was a pretty random point. Well, what about Hunter's laptop? I just wasn't making the connection.
What?
So that's why he texted me. He was like making the connection. Hunter's laptop and the Biden administration was suppressing speech and something about COVID and I don't know, say 3 Benghazis and call me in the morning. Um,
Don't forget Hillary's emails.
That's right. That's right. So I hope he doesn't listen to this episode now because he'll know what I'm talking about. He'll know that I'm referring to him. Anyway, but I'll have the conversation with him. But the truth is, so he was saying, well, you should do now an episode about Hunter's laptop. And I said, well, I invite you to start a podcast and do your own episode about Hunter's laptop. But that was kind of snarky. And I said, I it would be hard to persuade me to why I need to lose sleep over that. But I will tell you what I am thinking about. I'm thinking about you. Tell me about you. Tell me, this clearly bothers you. So, how did this arrive on your radar? Why did you come to have this understanding? And I'm interested in you. So that's kind of where I went with it. And fortunately, we can still call each other friends, even though I'm thoroughly unconvinced about the importance of Hunter's laptop. So anyway, I thought I was thinking about you when I was texting him over the weekend, John. Yeah, I thought you'd be proud.
And little did you know, I would have said, Jane, you ignorant slut.
I think we should just end it. No, it's good.
Well, we can edit that out.
No, please.
There's a certain generation that won't get it, but I still love that
I'm in the
routine.
generation. Voice that joke
We
every
all
time,
know what we're
John.
talking about.
Yeah.
And of course, that was funny because in 1976, it was so unthinkable
Right.
that anyone would say those things.
Yeah.
And now the joke's not funny anymore because people do say those things.
Yeah.
And that's tragic. Corey, you might not let me do this, but I'm going to try to weasel out by saying that Liz's answer to the TP&R question was so beautiful and compelling and harmonized with my answer. Can I just adopt it?
Yeah, you can.
Can I move on to asking you questions?
That was
Wow, I'm
next on the
honored.
list. Yeah, please
Because
do.
I have questions for
Oh
you.
boy, here we go.
I actually, seriously, I have two. You can take your pick,
Okay.
depending on your comfort and interest level. I think you're still resident in LA,
Yeah.
and I want to know how much LA has healed from the fires it has endured and then the ICE raids and campaigns that it has endured. LA has become the epicenter of so much of our national trauma. So that's question number one. And question number two is, Did you make any New Year's resolutions for Rosh Hashanah that you care to share with us?
I didn't. So, second question first. I did not, but my Jewish mother from New York sent me a Facebook card wishing me Lashana Tova, Tikatevu, all that good stuff, and all the Jewish guilt that comes with it. So, I will be thinking about it. How about that? Can I get back to you on that? Um, uh, but I did see a wonderful rabbi, Rabbi Brous, Sharon Brous, who runs a synagogue here in LA that I'm absolutely enamored with. It's called Ikar, and I can't tell you why. I still haven't put my finger on it. I've been going to services since I did some research about Rabbi Brous, preparing for an interview that we did at the end of last year. And I just keep finding myself going back to these services. I feel so at home. Anyway, that's a whole other story. To your first question about fire and ice, not to make light of it, but two very different answers. When it came to the fires, I saw what reminded me of my family and friends in New York on 9/11 and the days thereafter. And I hadn't seen that in LA communities, that being people essentially holding hands as a community and figuring out how we get through this. Whether it was something as seemingly mundane as a phone call to my friend Nancy, you know, how you doing? How you holding up? My pastor in Pasadena lost his home is gone, and sometimes it's just he was describing. I didn't realize how significant it was, but I knew that we at one time wore the same size pants, so I just brought him some jeans. And it turns out he couldn't wear them, but he knew people who could. So it was just, I don't know, somebody that night brought him toothbrush and toothpaste and things that the seemingly mundane all of a sudden became that much more significant. But it was this way that we all held hands and figured out how to get through a day and then how to get through a week, how to get through the year to the other side so we could figure out how to literally have a roof over our heads. And that part was encouraging. In terms of ICE, it's just the opposite. There are the way that friends who are more supportive of Trump's agenda versus those who are not couldn't be more different. Not just the way that they saw even peaceful protests. And here on June 14th in Santa Clarita, which is the very northern part of LA County, it's actually a very purple district. We had the most robust turnout for the No Kings rally than I had ever seen on that corner. There's, about, I don't know, once every 3 or 4 months, there's some sort of protest, but it's usually a few dozen, maybe a couple hundred people. There were thousands of people on that corner. And I went back later that day and there wasn't, not only was there no violence, was there no looting, there wasn't even a plastic bottle that was left behind. That corner was pristine. It was the very picture of what you'd want to see in terms of peaceable assembly. I was very encouraged. And despite what folks might think, it happened to be a pretty diverse group of people, including some of our local legislators and local elected officials who I know they're technically non-affiliated or whatever the word for it is, but I know that they're Republicans, one of whom now is actually running against George Whitesides as a Republican for California 27. But all that to say, the way that my friends who are supportive of Trump's agenda, they can't even see that. They can't even see that peaceful. They see every person who even thought about going to a No Kings protest as essentially the ones who were burning Waymos in the middle of the street and shutting down the 101. Let alone cheering on ICE. Talking about my pastor at the church, we had to go through a protocol of what we do if ICE shows up at our church, because literally within a mile of our church, ICE was showing up. And we have folks that come to Sunday services that don't have the legal documentation. So we had to go through protocol of what we do, what our obligations are, what our obligations aren't. So what all that to say, how we responded as a community to the fires was very, very different than how the two sides, I don't even see it as two sides. It's just folks see protesters, can't even possibly see folks peaceably protesting, expressing their First Amendment rights. They can't even see that, let alone cheering on what ICE is doing, the worst offenses, the worst, you know, the worst of what how ICE is carrying out its mission. So I don't know. I guess I'm of two very different minds about those two examples that you asked about. Liz, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so I was going to demur because on brand, John Rauch asked such great questions. But I think I would love to ask you. You're such a good interviewer, Corey. I would love to ask you just if there's some part of this conversation that you would like to share how you feel about, like just whatever, a point of pontification, something that made you think or feel
About Heterodox Academy.
about this whole conversation that we've had today. Just anything that you want a platform to say something more about.
Well, I do. I since we're doing plugs, I do want to make sure folks can easily find Heterodox Academy, heterodoxacademy.org. But that's not really an answer to your question.
Yeah,
Um,
and actually, I've got a little plug after you're finished too. So,
yeah, we'll do that. I want to make sure folks can find John's writing, Village Square, Heterodox Academy. So we'll do that. But to answer your question, um, it Heschel that talked about the sanctity in the mundane. The reason I wanted us to get together is because I am concerned about what's happening daily. Um, I am concerned by the level of power that a Stephen Miller is wielding, and the level of influence he's having, and that he's channeling so many voices. And when I see a Stephen Miller, and when it or Cash Patel at a hearing, basically to me look like he's throwing a temper tantrum that I wouldn't let my 3-year-old get away with. And then a dear friend of mine is cheering it on. Wasn't he great? So that all concerns me. That's I do lose sleep over that stuff. But this, talking to you, my dear friends, Liz and John, is good medicine. So I don't know if that's specific enough, but I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to get some perspective. I wanted to talk about what's happening. I wanted to learn more about Heterodox Academy. And we didn't need to do this for me to learn more about Heterodox Academy, but it was just an excuse to get together with you. So
well,
that's
the whole thing that we've learned all these years at the Village Square is that if you can step away from the national binary of the situation we're in, bring what you're doing and where you're spending your time closer to your community, what you described, the response to the fire in LA, that so many things change then. And ultimately you see people for the human beings they are, not, a caricature. And the accelerating illiberalism depends on us seeing each other as caricatures. And so I guess that would be another sort of invitation I'd make to people is just try stepping outside your door, touching some grass, being with people. My husband has a friend he plays basketball with. They don't see anything alike politically, but because of what I did years ago, they started having lunch regularly. And the two of them are dear friends. I mean, sometimes they spend 3 hours together at lunch. I just kind of think, what in the world are you talking about? And they still don't agree on anything political, right? Every once in a while they talk about it. But the political disagreement is the 20th most important thing about them. And so I don't know. I think you captured in your description a lot of what would be a healing thing to do. And while we were having this conversation, the promo part, I pulled up one of my favorite quotes. It's a little bit old from Van Jones about the intellectual environment of the university. I don't want you to be safe ideologically. I don't want you to be safe emotionally. I want you to be strong. That's different. I'm not going to pave the jungle for you. Put on some boots and learn how to deal with adversity. I'm going to take all the weights out of I'm not going to take all the weights out of the gym. This is the gym.
mm,
And when you think about when you think about being in college and learn, I mean, the most amazing moments I've had in my whole life is when suddenly an idea dawns on me that had, it was new. It feels new. It's like, oh my gosh, I see that now, and it's something new. And I think that's what we can and should be excited about. It's in our DNA. We can find it again. And I also wanted to maybe, Corey, you can put it in the show notes. Really inspiring piece written by the president of Heterodox Academy, John Tomasi, called "A University the World Has Never Seen."
Is that the one you
And
shared? You sent it to me,
I
the
think I
Substack
did, come to
piece.
think
Yeah.
of it. Yeah, later yesterday. I think it's really worth a read by anybody who's interested in this because it kind of sets sights on what we can and should be together. And he talks about how our ability to understand the whole of the world has so expanded in the increased diversity we have on campus in our societies. It's a beautiful opportunity if we can stay true to the principles of seeking truth through the constitution of knowledge.
Yeah, that's from an October 2024 Substack. It's on Tarasi's
John
Tomasi's
Tomasi.
um, page, as well as the Heterodox Academy's Substack as well. So I'll link that in the show notes. So while I have you, Liz, what how can folks find Village Square and just follow with all the great work that you're doing?
Go to villagesquare.us. We also have a podcast that the one and only Corey Nathan is the host of, Village Squarecast. And so you can listen to Village Squarecast where you get your podcasts. We also have a series called Unum that's a digital series that you can participate in from everywhere. We're in our fifth year, and this year we are bringing people who who are going to elucidate this 250-year-old experiment with us.
Mm. Looking forward to that series. And Jon, how can folks find your writing and find your books and all your great work?
Well, in the show notes, hopefully at jonathanrauch.com, on Amazon, at brookings.edu. I'm pretty easy
Yeah.
to bump into. And I'd encourage people, at least if they're part of the academic world, to check out heterodoxacademy.org. We have chapters on, was it 50 plus campuses
Yes,
with more coming
there.
on.
Mhm.
And these to me are the heart of the enterprise, which is the academic communities in specific universities in their own communities saying, what can we do here to improve the intellectual climate? Often working with other faculty and with administrations hand in hand. And to me, it's what Liz said earlier. That's how you change the hearts and really get these institutions back into focus.
So I have a question about Heterodox Academy. It maybe I might not even include this depending on what your answer is. So I don't even have a college degree. For folks like me, who only pretended to go to college for all of about a semester, are there ways for schmucks like me to to get involved?
I don't know because I think that policy is in flux. Liz, do you know? It used to be you had to be faculty and even postdocs had a specialty. I think maybe now did they open it up to a broader reach yet?
So
Do you
I
know?
don't know the specific policy, but I tell you what, I will ask. But I am not a part of the academy, and I have been deeply involved all these years in just the way that any average citizen can become involved. They do all sorts of programming online that you can participate in. So you can get their newsletter. But being a member is, I mean, I think that they've tried to stay true to this being something of by and for the academy, which I do think is important.
Yeah.
But I also think that I myself am an example of the fact that it was after I was on the board that I said, I think maybe I join as a member. So it's now been almost a decade that I've been a non-member and participating. So there are plenty of ways to get involved.
Good stuff. Yeah,
And I've been to all the conferences too, and it's like nobody asked me.
yeah.
for an ID card.
I was thinking that maybe I would get involved. I've been thinking about getting more involved in our local community college here, the College of the Canyons. But that's for another discussion. Before I close it out, we covered a lot. Is there anything important we have discussed that either of you would like to add?
As always, it's just fun to hang out with you,
It is
Corey
fun.
and John. I'm 2 days in a row on John Rauch,
Oh
so
man,
so I am a lucky human.
You
you
were
are.
you were overdosing.
Yeah,
You're
OD.
going to be worried when I show up at Brookings tomorrow.
Just just to thank you both for your friendship. And Corey, you know I love the podcast. This is what, my third or fourth appearance?
I think it's a lot more than that, actually. If we count,
Hopefully not my last.
hopefully, as soon as you get fed up with me, I'm actually gonna. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna rename this podcast "Epistemic Humanitarians."
No, I think you should rename it
The
The
epistemic
Talking
humility.
Politics.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks for doing this. This is such a treat to be with you and to see you. And I'll let you know. I think it's imminent that I'm due in DC sometime in the next couple of months. So I'll let you both. Oh, but you're in Florida, actually. Oh, Liz, I'm
DC
gonna
now.
be in Florida in November, so I might add a day or two to come your way.
I
But
would love that.
yeah, but I'll let you know. Anyway,
I'm trying
it's
to
good.
think
Love
if
the
there's something
beard,
we could do
Corey.
with that.
Oh, thanks, man. Oh yeah, I shaved it for the Kasich interview, but Lisa was making fun of me. She said I had like baby man face or something. She didn't like the no
Wait,
beard
how long
thing.
ago was the Kasich interview? You grew that back fast.
Yeah, it was about two. Well, we recorded it 2 weeks ago, but I released it last week. So, yeah.
Looks
Um,
good. Looks very
thank
hunky.
thank you.
You're a stud.
Oh, thank you. You making me look. I literally am
Look, he's
blushing.
blushing now.
Okay, I'm going to close it there. As always, if you dig what we're doing, remember to follow the show, write the review, do all the things. YouTube.com/@politics and religion. I'm at Corey S. Nathan, Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, on all the socials. Check out our Substack, really engaged over there. Go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.